All right, guys, we got a few questions. This is Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. We are talking about Auburn football, and we want to talk about the running backs today for the Auburn Tigers coming into this season with Texas and Oklahoma onboarding as SEC opponents. The leading guy, obviously, Jarquez Hunter, is on the books, on the docket for today. We want to talk about him and what his role is going to be and what it should be, and really dig into how this thing is going to play out in the 2024 season. Go ahead and like this video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. My name is Kennard Vernon Stewart, and my stage name is Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. In the Deep South, college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Jarquez Hunter, now a graduate of Auburn, want to give a big shout out and a War Eagle to him as well. And we look at the fact that Auburn has not had a 1,000-yard rusher since Kerryon Johnson in 2017. And Auburn is looking for Jarquez Hunter to be the leader and the starter in this role. And when we look at this, we have some concerns. I absolutely have some concerns. This young man is definitely a competitor, an incredible athlete. We look back to Brian Harson's tenure at Auburn and his recruiting efforts, or as many would like to say, lack thereof. Among his recruiting success could be, we'll see, could be Jarquez Hunter from Neshoba High School in Mississippi, where he rolled up a lot of yards there. And we won't discount the fact that, Brian Harsin did bring some guys to Auburn, and it just didn't work out. As a matter of fact, there was a certain point in year one of Brian Harsin's tenure to where he was one of the best coaches in college football. He had a run. He had a string of, beating some top 25 teams at the, Ole Miss, and during that time, and, pushing the envelope to do some good things down the stretch. And then with the Bo Nix injury, things kind of fell apart for Brian Harsin, and he just was never able to recover. Had a chance to recover against Alabama, but lost that game 24-22 in double overtime, and that kind of sealed the deal for him. He had some off-season controversies. There were some allegations, and whether they were warranted or not was enough to contribute to his demise. Like the video. Okay, so here's what we got to do. We got to get the comment section active. I want you guys to give me your opinions on the running back room for the Auburn Tigers. We're looking at some guys that are very talented, some guys that are looking to break out. But we have some questions about the leader in the room at this point. And Auburn going into this 2024 season, a very pivotal year for Hugh Freeze. He didn't get a quarterback in the transfer portal. Didn't take that route, but he did go out and get some receivers, get some defensive linemen, but did not go after any running backs or quarterbacks in this recruiting cycle, which probably means he trusts what he has. But what I just have to pose the question for some of the folks in the room is, with Jarquez Hunter, is he going to be the guy that ultimately leads Auburn? Now, he was suspended for a couple of weeks in 2023, which I think, this is just my bold opinion, at 909 yards for last season, if he was able to compete the full year, you know, would he have eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark? And I think yes. Absolutely, I think yes. He had some flashes in his first 2 years. Mind you, he was the backup to the great Tank Bigsby, who, my goodness, I had some wishing that Tank Bigsby would have come back for a final year. But either way, with with Jarquez Hunter, we got some questions, guys. And like I said before, go ahead and become a member to the channel. Also, check out some of the other Auburn content creators. You got On3, you got E2C that does his commentary. You also have the War Report that does commentary. You also have Jake Crane with Crane and Company that does Auburn commentary as well. And, you know, a few fan favorites such as Josh Pate that does some commentary on Auburn football. And also one of my favorite, I don't, to be honest, I haven't really checked into content creators as much as I used to in the past. One of the more comical yet informative content creators, not only for, I mean, he mostly does Georgia content, but he does a lot of college football content, is Uncle Lou on YouTube. And you got to check him out. Very funny, very informative, but gets to the point. And like I said before, War Report, On3, those guys do a really good job of covering recruiting and the ins and outs of Auburn football, and E2C as well. And there are probably some others that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But, you know, it's kind of interesting that although Auburn is not necessarily a blue blood program in college football, but that the interest is there. And I look back at my reason for being an Auburn fan to begin with. Because, see, like I tell a lot of people before, I wasn't always necessarily, I always liked Auburn. I always liked Auburn, and I always liked the intrigue. I liked the passion that Auburn football played with, you know, because I think back, you know, my aunt was, she went to Auburn for a little bit, and I was actually a Florida State fan for a very long time. I liked Florida State back in the Bobby Bowden era, the late 80s, early 90s. I'm kind of telling my age here. But in the back of my mind, I always liked Auburn. I always wanted Auburn to beat Alabama because I grew up kind of sort of liking both teams, Alabama and Auburn. But I always wanted Auburn to win that game for some reason. And as I grew and developed, and I still, you know, remained a Florida State fan for the most part, and I had the opportunity after 1 year as a freshman at Alabama A&M, transferring to Auburn. I still, I was an Auburn fan, I guess, and that was during the time where Auburn wasn't really winning that much, you know, the 6-5 and 7, you know, those mediocre type seasons, but just feeling the energy of Jordan-Hare Stadium. I remember the one game that I had the opportunity to go. Well, I went to several games that year, but in 1999, having the opportunity to see Alabama and Auburn play in Jordan-Hare Stadium, and Sean Alexander from Alabama and Auburn really competing in that game, giving themselves the opportunity to win that game, you know, I was like, you know what, this is a pretty good situation. But what really solidified me as an Auburn fan, and this is even after I graduated from Auburn in 2003, it was the 2004 season. Nick Saban brought LSU into town, and the way Auburn fought, the way Auburn had that passion to win football games was what really, really solidified myself to where I wanted to align myself as not only an alumnus of Auburn, but as an Auburn fan and just a follower of Auburn football as to what we have today. I think Auburn is a great program, and it has put themselves in a position, especially with the onboarding of Hugh Freeze as head coach, with the recruiting efforts that he has had. I think that could possibly put Auburn in a position to be successful. Now, Hugh Freeze was asked recently, hey, do you think this is a playoff, college football playoff potential team? I think that's, and I take on Hugh Freeze's opinion, like that's really an asinine question to ask. You don't know what you have to work with. You don't know what the quarterback position will bring in relation to the offensive linemen and wide receivers that you bring on. I mean, he has a plethora of potential talent at the wide receiver position with Keandre Lambert Smith, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, guys that he has brought in to give this wide receiver room a little bit more potential. But you just can't answer that question at this point. But going back to Jarquez Hunter, Jarquez Hunter is a 4-year senior. He has actually earned his degree at Auburn. Incredible athlete. But what we need to see from Jarquez Hunter is a little bit more consistency, because when we look at every year that he's played, you have mediocrity in yards rushing, but there's always that stretch where he hits a stride to where it's like, you look at the 2023 season, where in the Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Arkansas game, those were his 100-yard plus games. But you look at games like Georgia and Texas A&M and Alabama, he did get 93 yards against Alabama, which was huge. But that was, even in the Alabama game, 93 yards at 6.6 yards per carry. His long was 42 yards. And even in the Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss game, you get 183 yards there. You get 144 yards against Mississippi State. You get 109 yards against Arkansas. But in the Vanderbilt and Mississippi State game, the majority of your yards were on one carry. He had a long of 50 yards. So what Auburn is going to be looking for in a Jarquez Hunter is, hey, can we get a consistent 90 yards, 80 yards? Because we do know that the defense in SEC is tough. Power 5 in general is tough. But we got to have that production to where you get 80, 75, 90. And then maybe have your breakout game at 120, 150, and then combine that with yards receiving, because his yards receiving hasn't been all of that incredible as well. So can we get a consistent Jarquez Hunter to where he averages about 90 to 95 yards per game? That will be a difference maker, along with his counterparts, Damari Alston, Brian Battie, Jeremiah Cobb, who is one of my favorite running backs in that room, with a lot of speed and a lot of talent. Take this Auburn running game to the next level. My name is Kennard Vernon Stewart. For the podcast, Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. Hope that you like this video. Go ahead and subscribe. If you feel compelled to, become a member. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger.